Hi everybody, this is Vladimir Milov from a self-imposed isolation in Moscow, and I'm going to update you on what's happening with coronavirus in Russia and how government is handling this situation. First, you don't have to be lulled by the official relatively mild numbers about the confirmed cases. I think, to my best knowledge, the recent number is 3,500. The government brags about reaching the relatively high testing capacity. They say right now they're doing 36,000 tests a day. However, they already did, I think they surpassed 500,000 tests already. But there are very severe doubts in the reliability of the Russian testing system. Because we have a number of extremely unfortunate cases from personal experience, like one of our fellow friends and opposition activists in Kaliningrad recently has been tested positive for coronavirus, but this happened only after a second test, on which he insisted, being in a critical condition for several days, having a fever and difficulties with breathing. I think he's on a ventilator right now. His first test was negative. And only he was bashing on their heads and insisting that they did a second test. They did it, and it turned out to be positive. So the reliability of Russian testing is a big question. Also, the government is trying to use all the possible ways to suppress the real information. Information sharing by doctors from hospitals who obviously know the situation on the ground better. So you don't have a real picture. However, you do have a lot of signs, like we, the Soviet-born people, we have a good skill of reading the truth between the lines of the official statements. So there are several criteria which can allow you to tell that the situation is much more serious than the authorities actually want you to know. First is you really have to watch a very short video of a conversation between Vladimir Putin and the mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, who was appointed to lead the coronavirus task force in the Russian government. It's on the Kremlin's website, and it's very telling. Because first, Sobyanin, when he speaks, he looks extremely worried about what happens. And he actually says all that stuff that we fear is really happening. He says that the pandemic spreads at an extremely fast rate, which is very dangerous, that we don't have sufficient capacity in our healthcare system to handle that. He literally says all these words, plus you have a lot of different stuff going down. Just very recently, the government of Moscow had appointed a plan to reprofile hospitals with adding some thousands of new beds to treat patients in critical condition associated with coronavirus. This gives you the idea of scale, how they view it's going to evolve over the next weeks and days. And second, from my residential experience, normally in the residential areas in Moscow, you don't have a lot of police. Russian police is extremely lazy and is never present. It's totally absent all the time. Well, not right now. Not right now. I mean, in a different, like during a Chechen war and terrorist attacks in Moscow, you didn't have that many police as we have now monitoring the lockdown. Which is a very telling thing to me, that the government is understanding that the scale of the situation is extremely critical. That's briefly the situation that we have right now. I assume it's going to get worse because, listen, that's important. 90% of the confirmed cases in Moscow, as announced recently, are people who never went abroad in the recent period. So this is already, the coronavirus is very deep-rooted domestically, which means that the scale of epidemic might be much worse than we even think, with obviously insufficient government response. So unfortunately, that's the grim reality that we have to face right now.